What's up, guys, and welcome back to iCoach Nutrition Radio. Guys, today I am bringing on a guest that I've actually had on the podcast once before. Last time we talked about kind of PCOS, myth busting. We talked about kind of this idea of self-love, and then we talked about kind of her idea of the anti-diet there. And so super excited to welcome her back onto the show. Astrid, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. As for the listeners here, so she is like we're on completely opposite sides of the world right now doing this podcast, which is really cool. I literally just woke up, so I'm over here like chugging coffee, trying to wake up, and she's a night owl, so she actually loves being up at this time. But I'm super excited to be able to kind of pick her brain a little bit. We're gonna talk on the topics here, guys, of well, first off, if you want to learn a little bit more about her, go listen to the other podcast, or I'll share all of her links here. We'll save that, or that we talked about that last time there, so y'all can get that there. But what we want to talk about today, guys, is the cycle that we see so often with so many clients that we work with, which is like you hear this thing of like, oh, I'm eating in a calorie deficit and not losing weight. And that's, that's them eating in a calorie deficit, let's say Monday through Thursday, right? And then blowing it out of the water on the weekend. Right? Or even if they're not tracking their food, this kind of binge restrict cycle of, essentially, being good, quote unquote, right? Or eating healthy during the week, but then on the weekend, just kind of blowing things out there. And it could just even be like through the holiday season here, same thing, right? In America on average, like I think if the stats are still the same, we see like an average of 15 pounds gain through the holiday season of like Halloween through New Year's. So there's this kind of binge restrict cycle. There's this cycle of like starting and stopping, right? And I think that it's something that a lot of people struggle with. I know I've struggled with it in the past. I know that I probably will struggle with it again in the future, right? It's something that a lot of people struggle with. But yeah, what are your kind of overall thoughts on this? Is this something I'm just seeing, or is this something you're seeing quite a bit as well there?
I think binge eating is very common. And in fact, I'm doing next month, January 2021, a talk about binge eating and how it relates. There is so much of a bigger prevalence here now in the fitness industry. And much of this is really associated with different causes. One of those is obviously this chronic rigid dieting with this all or nothing mindset, or where we put foods in a pedestal when they are categorized, so they are thought as being good and others to be categorized as bad. So these bad foods tend to be neglected, or we have to avoid them or completely eliminated from our diet. So I think it is more I think that binge eating has always been there, but it's now because it's being brought up more often. I think people are coming up and talking about it and being more honest about what the struggles are, and I think it's becoming a little bit more a topic that is easier to disclose, especially if we're referring to someone who might have been hiding for years, but might have been doing this for a while, but now because it's something that people are not, people are saying that is something that is more common to hear. It is less a taboo. I think it is becoming something that people are getting more honest about, and it's easier to discuss. So I guess that's the point. But I don't think the binge eating. I think that it is important to separate what binge eating is from actual binge eating disorder, and generally talking about eating disorders in general. It is can have their difference, and like if you have an actual binge eating disorder, it is a disorder, obviously, that is related to, it is diagnosed and it has specific signs. For example, if you can see that someone who has a binge eating disorder diagnosed, they might have one or two times a week they have mild, it is considered mild if they binge in twice a week. If they binge in 4 to 5 times a week, they might be suffering from moderate binge eating, or 8 to 13 times might be considered as a severe binge eating disorder, or even extreme. It is considered when they are binge eating more than 14 times. And when we define binge eating, obviously, if it hasn't been diagnosed by a psychiatrist or a medical practitioner, you could probably self-diagnose, but not necessarily be medicated or treated adequately. So it is good, like if you think you have this problem, it is good to always ask for help. But generally, what binge eating is, and I think it is important to sort of separate it from what overeating could be, because overeating is something that we can always do, but overeating might not be associated with a negative feeling or guilt or shame, or feeling or uncomfortably full, or keep eating even though we're not hungry, or trying to eat because we feel disgusted or depressed or shame, or there are negative emotions associated with this. So I think that's the most important thing, to differentiate and separate it for overeating. You can be at a picnic or at a party and eat, and perhaps you eat a little bit more than normal because it tastes good, but there is no feeling of guilt or shame associated with that. And it's not because you felt that you lost the control over your food or over your emotions, but rather it was something that you intentionally did, and you were consciously of what were you doing. But when we talk about binge eating, sometimes we can think about binge eating as losing sometimes control, not being able to control our emotions, or respond, trying to use food as a coping mechanism to block an emotion that is causing us harm or pain, or feeling disgust, or something that is always associated with a negative emotion. So until this point, I think, does that sort of make sense? Would you have a follow-up questions on this?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I think we could take this conversation many different ways, right? But I think you're absolutely right. We want to make sure we're differentiating here. We're not talking about an actual eating disorder, right? We're not talking about some of these things that, you really are going to be beyond this conversation here, or this would be like a completely different podcast if we were actually talking about true eating disorders here. But yeah, I think what we're talking about here is when we say, we're talking about kind of what you mentioned, right? Which is like this idea of stress eating, of emotional eating, right? Because we see that come up so much, right? And I find it's interesting because a lot of the times it stems from childhood for a lot of people, right? I told my story many times, but when I was like in high school, it was like I really struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. There's a lot of people that struggle with food addiction, right? And they use this food there, and they haven't been diagnosed with an eating disorder or anything like that, but they use food as an emotional thing. They use it as a stressful thing. And to be honest with you, I think you're right in that it is something that has stemmed from the culture of the industry, right? Like, and I see it, I don't want to put general statements, but I see it a lot more as we're working with clients that are older, right? So as we get into the 40, 50, 60-year-old crowd here, right? And we're thinking about nutrition history here, right? It makes a lot of sense. And what's happened is they've gotten this mindset with nutrition that everything is either good or bad, right? You can have that or you can't have that. It's on my Whole30 list or it's not, whatever. And not to knock Whole30 here. There's some very good things that come out of that. But the point of it is like when I work with clients, and I know that you are the same here, is that when you start to create more freedom and flexibility with your nutrition, the binging or the overeating or the stress eating or the emotional eating, whatever you want to call it there, that starts to go down. Like that starts to slow down. You start to get a better relationship with food and with your body. And I think that, that is something, that is such a mindset shift that so many people need to have. And that, hey, there's no such thing technically as like good or bad food. Like I love the saying of like, hey, no food left behind, right? Like if you want to have food, if you want to have something as part of your nutrition and of your life there, like you should not feel restricted, because the restriction, like if I sat here and told you right now you're not allowed to have this, you're going to automatically think about it and want it, right? Restriction leads to binging. That's what I always kind of say there. So yeah, I completely agree. And I think that, we see this a lot. And, I think people use different things for different reasons, right? A lot of it's like an escape. Like the weekends for a lot of people are like a quote unquote, like an escape, right? Like they've been in work mode all week. Like they just want to be able to enjoy themselves. They don't want to plan. They just want to relax, right? Like, and so it's like an escape. But it brings me back to like my struggles, because that's what alcohol is for people. It's an escape. That's what drugs are for people. It's an escape, right? And so when you start to look at addiction, I mean, there's a lot of similarities there amongst the different types of addictions. So yeah,
I I would add that there are potentially more reasons or more causes for binge eating within the fitness industry. And the other two that I would mention is obviously that over evaluating of your body. So it means like people are placing a lot of importance in how they look and how they should look and how it is now, and if it looks good, it is they are worth it because they are looking better, they are worth it for whoever sees them. But if you're not looking as good, or when you compare yourself a lot with uh, your previous you or your past, it is always contrasting, because you're always looking back at, I should be looking like this, I used to be this way, now I'm this way. And I am, it's like this over in, giving so much weight and importance to the outer look in, and paying less attention to other areas of your life, and reducing the how much you still uh, how much your worth is still intact, regardless of uh, an extra quite a few extra pounds if you had a change, because there are obviously life is changing, and it's in cycles. Like for example, you can probably be training really hard, and maybe you competed in a show, but then you have to recover from that. You have to pay attention to your body, to how your health, and then suddenly you maybe get married, you have kids. Now there's another story, and life is evolving all the time, and it is a matter of trying to adapt without trying to compare your current body to your previous body, if it has changed, because your body is adapting to your each situation, and it probably becomes sometimes might have been a priority, and then some other times it's not as a huge priority as it used to be before. So that's a big reason why people tend to over restrict. So over evaluating your body leads to this chronic dieting and restrictive um, patterns and mindset. And the other thing is could be that associated with that emotional eating is a low mood. So shift in moods, particularly negative moods, are predictors of binge eating as well.
yeah, yeah. No, those are all really great points. I um I think that it's really interesting, as I think, when people work with coaches, right? I think the one of the best things that happens is they gain so much awareness, right? They now have this person, right, who's on their team, who's kind of looking at their life, from a 10,000-foot view, right? And they're seeing everything that's going on, right? And they're helping you to build awareness right? So that therefore then you can start to make the changes in your life that you want to make there. And I think that that is like such a powerful thing that, you know, once people go through, because a lot of people, I mean, one-on-one coaching and nutrition coaching and all these things, I mean, it's starting to become more normalized, I guess I could say, but like there's still plenty of people out there that have like no idea what that process actually looks like and like what it could actually do for them. Um, and it's just it's interesting as I'm listening to you talk and as I'm like reflecting back on just the years I'm working with clients and just thinking about kind of that process there, because it's you know, awareness precedes change, right?
Yep.
But there's so many people out there that they're just not getting the awareness around, you know, what's going on in their life that they need. And it's really hard to get that awareness unless you start to track your habits, right? Like there's plenty of people out there that, you know, when we think about this binging or this emotional eating or stress eating or whatever, like there's a lot of people out there that they don't even know how much they're doing it. They don't even realize how much they're doing it, right? And so like, what are your thoughts around that? Like when you start actually working with clients, right? Like when you start kind of helping your clients navigate through these things, overcome these challenges, right? And again, guys, we're not talking about true eating disorders here, right? We're talking about just the everyday thing here. But how do you start to create, how do you start to help clients kind of create a healthier relationship with their body and with this kind of binge restrict cycle, and help them to get to a place where, you know, they're happy, right? They're happy because like you said, comparison is the thief of joy, right? That's the saying, right? So it's like if we compare ourselves to other people, or if we compare ourselves even to a previous self, right? I mean, that's something I work a lot of with moms. My wife, you know, she had Josiah here 2 years ago now. Crazy to think, but you know, I hear so many moms out there. I could probably go. This is a whole other tangent. I hear a lot of moms that are like, you know, I want to get my you know, my pre-baby body back, and I'm like, honey, you know, you're building the new mama body. Like your body just did amazing things, and so that's a whole nother tangent. That's a whole nother conversation. But how do you kind of help your clients navigate through some of these things? Like if you just think about some of the recent, you know, clients that maybe that come to mind for you here, like maybe you could give some examples, some specific examples of what they are struggling with, and then how you kind of help them to work through it and navigate through it.
Yeah, I see it all the time. And look, most of my clients really come with some level of struggle with emotional eating, and they've been trying to lose weight for years, and this yo-yo dieting, and they have obviously mentioned in our first assessment, they have tried every single diet on the earth. They have done a lot of different things, and nothing seems to work. But I always like to explore deeper why these things don't work, because sometimes it's not that they didn't work, it's that they weren't able to be consistent with that enough, because that wasn't aligned with their lifestyle. So I think generally the problem seems to be that our clients are always in the look for what is the best thing that I should be looking for, I should be following, what is the best trend that I should be doing so I can lose weight. But they don't think that perhaps what they need is trying to find the simple little tweaks that they can do on their own lifestyle to make changes that are potentially more sustainable and likely to work for them as an individual. So a recent client started working with me. I I remember she was speaking with me about that she tried every single diet in the earth, and she hasn't been able to lose weight. And she has been like, she has trained a lot of she does her training, she's responsible, trying to do her meal prep, everything seems to try to be on that line of doing what she's meant to do. But because she gets so overwhelmed, there's a point that she seems to say, I'm sick of this, I am overwhelmed, I'm tired, I think I'm doing this all the time, and I don't seem to find joy in what I'm doing. And it seems to imply that I have to do so many things to be able to find my body, my ideal body. And it is like a constant struggle. So one of the things I was speaking with her was, what are your true expectations? Because I really want you to define what your expectations are with your weight, and who are you comparing yourself to right now? Are you comparing yourself to your 20-year-old girl that 20 years ago, or are you trying to find something that is going to allow you to be more consistent, to get a realistic body that you can maintain at your current pace of lifestyle? Everything you have to consider a lot of different things. So that was the first thing I sort of uh, tried to understand from her. So what is happening that you're not necessarily being able to stay consistent on those things? And that, and additional to that, I think she's been trying to get that magical diet, that trendy diet that is going to help her to lose weight, because it seems to work for a lot of people. Why not for me? So I just said to her, let's look at something that is probably is going to probably sound dumb or simple, but I just want you to think about how is your the perfect diet. How would that look like for you? Like, what would you have for breakfast if you didn't follow any diet, if you weren't following any trend or any keto or paleo? If it was you, what would you add to that? What would you have for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner? Would you have for snacks? um, let's look at how much protein you're actually eating at the moment, because sometimes is that you might not be eating enough nutrient dense foods. Maybe you're not eating adequate amount of protein, and that's probably leading you to eat more in the afternoon, so is increasing your cravings, or because you're not satiated enough. Perhaps is that you've been under eating for so long that you feel like there's no more calories to take or remove from your current diet, because you have already restricted yourself so much that you've got your body to a point where it's gotten used to that amount of calories. So to actually change your body weight and see some difference and some changes, you have to reduce your calories even further. So maybe you're not in a place to keep losing or reducing more your calories. Maybe we need to reverse dieting for a while to get your body to a better place to start dieting again. And maybe you just need to learn what your actual current maintenance can be and get you there for a while, and stop thinking about dieting for a little bit and try to improve and work all the things that you might need to work if you want things to be sustainable. So that means the relationship with food has to be prioritized. Are you eating mindfully? Are you paying attention to your meals? Are you having a good structure of your meals? Like, I think it seems to be underrated, but if you don't have a structure, let's say a consistent structure is, for me, is like, well, if you decide to have 3 meals a day, have the 3 meals, but have them consistently every day, roughly around the same times, because your body likes the rhythm of things. Your body likes the habit, the routine. And if you're eating, some days you're skipping breakfast, you only have dinner, and other days you only have 1 meal a day, and other days you have 3 meals a day, there's so much inconsistency in the way you're distributing your meals and the way you're eating, that your body doesn't like that. And it is going to trigger cravings. It is going to obviously, you might not be getting adequate amount of calories or energy availability. Leptin is going to go down, ghrelin is going to go up. It is going to be a lot of different changes hormonally and physically, that things are not going to be stable, or you're not going to get that rhythm you want for your body to be in, to have like more, your body in a better place. So I think everything is connected. I know calories in, calories out is the biggest part of the puzzle, but our hormones affect calories in and calories out. Things are all interconnected together. So we need to think and look at biofeedback to being able to adjust what are we doing with our diet, with our calories, with our macronutrients. There's a lot of things that go into place. So to make the response a little bit shorter and actually sort of summarize, I think the main thing to work with a client, it obviously is going to be very individual, but I really like to follow my like do a really good deep conversation with the client to understand what is going on, what are the struggles, what are the things that they have done in the past that worked for them, and what are the things that didn't work for them and why. Understand the current situation, the current uh, struggles with their weight, their lifestyle in general, their age, and obviously some age related issues. Probably someone is going through menopause. I get a lot of clients that could be in perimenopause, so they are dealing with some nasty things that probably are not as easy to deal with. So you gotta account this into consideration and look at the full nutrition history of the person and see, well, if you see the things you were doing when things were working for you, what has changed now that things aren't working as well for you? And when you analyze when things were working for the person, maybe is one of them usually and tends to come very, very common is that they are not eating adequate amount of protein. They are potentially have been under eating for a long period of time. They probably are not being consistent with their resistance training as well. So there is a lot of different things that come into place that when you analyze it, you can say, well, these are potentially the things that if we start trying to tweak some of these and include them back into your current lifestyle, if we can fit them in some way, let's see what happens and try to adapt it to the lifestyle they currently have, so it doesn't feel like it's something that is going to be a complete like 180 change for them. So they have to do something so completely different that is going to be very difficult to follow up and be consistent with. So maybe I've got with clients that they just needed to start being more mindful about their choices. Other clients, I tell them, you know what? I just want you to stop dieting and let's just play a game of self-experimentation for 1 or 2 weeks. Whether I don't want you to log your foods before your meals, but actually I want you to eat first and then you log your meals. I want you to start paying attention to your hunger cues, how much you actually eat. And sometimes you might not be midway and you're full, but sometimes because people log things before, they feel like they're forced to eat the whole thing at that point, or they need to stress so much about specific targets and macronutrients and things that are very specific that if they go below or beyond that number, it is a complete failure for them. So trying to be more flexible, but also be more in tune with the needs and how your body responds. It is something that I try to teach my clients from the very first day. So when we start working on other things and maybe we start a fat loss phase, there are skills that they have learned that they are going to be able to utilize, not just in the meantime that they're losing fat, but they're also going to apply that once they have finished their fat loss phase and there's now time for maintenance. Because that's the other challenge. People can lose fat and sometimes that's an easy way, an easy part of the journey. But then once they've lost their weight, they don't know what to do or what behaviors they should be applying or implementing to maintain what they've got and keep it off for the sake of not gaining the weight back.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. You made so many great points there. I think everybody should like rewind back the podcast and re-listen to that segment that she just talked about there, because you made so many great points. I mean, there's so many things in there that I too do with clients, and I think it's so important there. You said one thing, right? And you said the reason you're not being consistent is, with your diet or with your nutrition, right, is because the diet you're trying to follow is not in line with your lifestyle, right? And again, like we could sit there and trace this back to the history, right? And so many times we see that correlation of people are in this all or nothing mindset because of the culture of this industry and all of the diets that they've tried, right? Like they've always tried to fit themselves into this cookie cutter box of a diet rather than trying to build their own, right? And so I love what you do there in terms of like thinking to yourself, like, what are the things that you've done in the past that you liked, you enjoyed, that improved your life, that worked for you, and what are the things that you hated about XYZ diet, right? Because ultimately, like if there's something that you don't like about it, you don't enjoy about it, whatever, like then you're not going to do it anyways, right? You might do it when the motivation and willpower is there, but like that's going to go away, as soon as life happens, right? So I love that. I think you made so many great points there, guys. I think that you've got to realize that as you're listening to this podcast, right, you're going to have these little light bulb moments, right? And you're going to have these little nuggets, these little takeaways, and all of that's great, right? But taking action, right, and actually going out, taking this advice, taking this information, this knowledge, and actually going and taking action and applying it, that's the part that matters more than anything else. And you don't have, I always challenge people with this, is like, you don't have to work necessarily one-on-one with a coach, but what you do need to do is you need to start building awareness for yourself and for your own life. And for some people, they can do that on their own. For others, like it's much easier to be done with a coach, or sometimes they can't find it without the coach. But you can do little things. It could be as simple as having a calendar and marking X's and O's, for you doing a habit every single day to prove to yourself, like, if there's something that you think that you're being consistent, or if there's something that you need to work on or improve on, like, we have to build awareness around, are you actually doing it or not? I mean, take 30 days, 16 days, 90 days, whatever, and track these things. Use a habit tracker. There's free habit tracking apps out there. You can create one on Google Sheets, whatever. If you want one, I'll send you ours for free. but I want you to start tracking some of these things, tracking some of these habits, because once you start doing that and building the awareness, you will be able to start making these changes. Like, like, we're not special by any means, right? We've just worked with a lot of different people and learned a lot of different things along the way. And I think that, a lot of like what I want to really focus on with nutrition is like, how can we simplify this for your life? Because we can definitely make nutrition super complicated. There's plenty of people out there doing that, right? But at the end of the day, like, when we really think about the principles, when we really think about what matters most, guys, we can really start to try to simplify these things, because the thing that most people struggle with, 99.9% of people struggle with the most, is actually being consistent for a long enough period of time to transform your lifestyle and your habits there. So, let's make it as simple as possible so that we can make that goal of consistency the number one focus.
That's my main goal with each one of my clients. I always the first thing I tell them to do is, whatever we're going to do, you got to think that we need to be consistent with this. And maybe I don't want you to get focused on your weight, because obviously we want that to go down if our goal is to lose weight. And most of the times, to be honest with you, every client that's going to come to you is because they want to lose some weight somehow, look better. And they have tried that on their own and they have failed. So they're trying to look at an additional advice and additional guidance and support with a coach to see whether they can do something different. Is there something that they can do differently this time that is going to help them to achieve the body or whatever they're looking for? However, sometimes I try to encourage not to focus on weight loss, even though it is one of the main things that they want to achieve. And sometimes it might be discouraging for some people some clients, because they want to listen from me that I'm going to give them macros and I'm going to give them a meal plan, and that's the thing that they are expecting. But sometimes I tell them, I'm not really the one who should be giving you a meal plan in the first place, or telling you what to do, because that is going to potentially lead to not being able to do it. Because if it comes from me and not from you, it is probably something that is not necessarily something that you could do for a very long time. But what about if we negotiate? What about if you tell me what would you have for each meal, and I give you feedback? So rather than telling you what to do, I guide you through it. So some patients give me in a Word document, I tell them to do their homework is, I write everything that you think you would eat on a day, and how would that meal plan would look like for you. And they write everything, and then I sort of comment on their Word document, and I give them feedback. That can give me hints of whether they have been so restricted that they probably, you see the meal plan and there's no carbohydrates in there anywhere. I don't see carbohydrates. I see a lot of vegetables, very good, a lot of fiber. It might have some protein, but there's sometimes there's no carbohydrates at night or at lunch, and then they're complaining that why they are craving, or they have cravings all the time, why they have so low energy. You can see it just with that, without asking them anything else. Just give me what would you think is a perfect meal plan. And that's what they have been doing for so long, that's set in their heads that they should be eating as little as possible, no carbohydrates, only vegetables, only protein, and that's what they should be doing. So I actually try to not force them, but try to encourage to change some of these behaviors and these thought patterns. So why I had a client, now that I remember, I had a client that used to wake up in the middle of the night and she would literally eat bread or some carbohydrates, but the rest of the day she was eating no carbohydrates at all. She was very low carbohydrate eater. She probably would have a little bit of sweet potato at lunch at the most, but the rest of the day she would eat a lot of protein and a lot of vegetables and a little bit of fat. But her diet was like around 1,200 calories, and she was decently well formed. She had muscle, she was training hard, and she wasn't having any carbohydrates, but she was waking in the middle of the night, and she was asking me, well, help me to stop this, because I think this is something that I want to change. But then when I challenged her to start having carbohydrates throughout the day, because I asked her, well, what are the things you're eating when you wake up? Bread, carbohydrates. Yeah, why do you think is that? Rather than eating that at night, why don't we use the same amount of carbohydrate that you're still eating anyway and put it through the day and see what happens? And I think she was resistant to a point that she tried it, and she started reducing the time she was waking up in the middle of the night. Obviously, because it was such a long-term habit that she built. It was like at least 10 years of practicing that pattern of waking up in the middle of the night to get the carbohydrates she didn't have to eat the day. She would struggle still to have carbohydrates during the day, and she would still wake up in the middle of the night. But it was because she was hungry after we started implementing the strategies. It's because we needed to stop as well that bad habit that she built without really making any sense. So if you start looking and analyzing what was happening there, is that she was coming from a place of such a deep restriction of carbohydrates because she was told to not eat them in an adequate amount because they would make her fat, that she was always scared of eating carbohydrates throughout the day. And she felt that she had to go and eat less than 1200 calories to be fit and have the muscles she had and look lean. If she was not eating other things and she was avoiding carbohydrates, she would still eat them anyway, but she wouldn't account for them. So it's just like a battle of what is trying to be honest about what is the problem, and try to challenge the client on that sense and say, well, this is potentially the problem. Let's try to solve it by adding something that you probably have been restricting for a while, and let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, people listening and they might be like, oh, well, that seems like such a little simple hack, but maybe for that person, right? Again, not having somebody over her, that 10,000 foot view, she's not even realizing what she's doing. And when you connect the dots, then she's like, oh, and she has this light bulb moment. But I mean, again, it's like it's not these clients' fault, right? It's, if you're listening to this, it's not your fault. It's the culture of the diet industry, of the fitness industry, right? I mean, if I sat here and I grew up during this low fat era, right, and all I ever heard was that fat's bad for your fat makes you fat, all these low fat diets, right? And that was such an influence of me. And then we rolled in this era of like, carbs are the devil, carbs are bad, don't eat carbs, carbs make you fat. Well, I mean, my God, if you've heard don't eat fat, fat makes you fat, and don't eat carbs, carbs make you fat, you can only eat so much protein, right? So it's like, I mean, of course, our mindset with nutrition, we just have completely unrealistic expectations as to what living a healthy lifestyle is, right? And I think, going back to what you said there, I love the idea of adding things rather than feeling like you're taking things away, because that's the culture too. So many people are like all in or all out when it comes to nutrition. They're either on a diet or they're not, right? And the reason because is it's like, well, me being on a diet in people's heads, it's like, I can only eat these things, I can't eat these things. And that's not necessarily the truth there. So the thing I always ask clients when we first start working together and we're building out this quote unquote plan for the rest of their life there, we're thinking to ourselves, we're like, what are our non-negotiables, right? What are the things that you absolutely want to have on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, basis there, so that we are not getting off of this again? Like, you're not on a diet, like we're building the quote unquote diet for the rest of your life here, right? So the question comes up as to like, if you can't do this for the rest of your life, then what the hell is the point of even doing it in the first place, right? And there is a caveat to that. Let's say, like, for example, like if you were tracking on like MyFitnessPal or something, like you're not going to do that for the rest of your life. You might do it in the beginning to build awareness or whatever. So there are things like that. For those of you listening, they're like, well, what about, but the point of it is it's like, if you ask yourself the question, can I do this for the rest of your life? Like, I mean, not to knock any of these diets out here, but like, there is no way in hell I could do the keto diet for the rest of my life. Like, I can't do that. So if that's like the most popular diet out there right now, and so many people are trying to do it because maybe so many people are getting results off there, short-term results from it, then it's like, man, how are so many people out there thinking that they're going to be able to do this for the rest of their life?
And look, there might be people that will follow keto diets, and they will like that lifestyle, and they can probably be in that for long time. Like, I know clients, not my clients, but I know patients, and I've met a lot of people in the hospital where I work, that because they struggle so much with eating a lot of highly palatable foods, they gain a lot of weight. They found this diet that was higher in fats, higher in protein, lowering calories, as potentially coming from the carbohydrates they used to be so attached to, that they were able to sort of cut that to a point that it was easier for them to lose weight and find a calorie deficit. But it probably were to a point that it aligned with their preferences, and they were enjoying that, and they were able to sustain it. So low carbohydrate people can be very happy in that concern, if they find enjoyment and they can sustain that lifestyle. And same with people that like to have a high carbohydrate diet. I think the problem of obesity and everything that comes down to uh, gaining fat, insulin resistance, all of these comes to the increase of people eating more highly processed foods that are related to the combination of carbs and fats together. And the reason of this is because only eating carbohydrates are unlikely to be as highly palatable that if you ate something that is not just carbohydrate but some fat added to it. It is that combination that makes it super highly palatable and create that sensation that you want to have more of it. So that makes it much harder to say, well, I just want to have, I just have a piece and that's it. It makes it much harder because it's that combination that increases the energy density, increases the palatability, the everything that you want in a food that wants to taste good, and it's going to bring some increase your dopamine in the brain, the sensation of feeling good, that you want to have more of it. That's when you feel like when we blame carbohydrates, for example, a lot of people confuse like a donut is a carbohydrate. And it's probably because of the sweet taste that that's sugar. But they actually fried, and that's a component of fat in that makes it really tasty. So it is not just carbohydrate, but it's carbohydrates and fat together that increases the palatability. And most of the times, these foods that have this combination are very low in protein. So they are not satiating either, and they have probably a very low profile of micronutrients. So there is very low micronutrients, very low protein, very high in carbohydrates, and fats and energy. So it is this sort of what I call protein dilution, or like there's no protein, but it's more a lot of energy that makes this problem more difficult to solve. So people that are low carb or high carb, they're probably very good in any of these extremes because they're restricting one of the components that make food so delicious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that right there is the science of the fast food industry, right? I mean, it's the engineering of foods there. And, something I say all the time is that if we really think about it, right, if we're looking at these three macronutrients, right, if we're looking at protein, fat, and carbohydrates, what I've heard you say, a million times throughout this podcast, and I say it all the time as well, clients that are listening to this, they're probably like, yeah, I'm sick of hearing you talk about it. But if I look at the majority of clients that I've worked with over the last 10, 11 years here, and I think about all the other people that I have on the podcast and all of this, there are so many people out there that are under eating protein, right? And so therefore overeating carbohydrates and fats, right? And it makes total sense, right? If protein is the most satiating of those three macronutrients, if you're under eating the most satiating one, you're probably going to end up overeating the other two, right? And that's why, again, if I bring up, if a diet like keto comes out, and again, not knocking keto, there's plenty of people that are successful in keto or low carb diets, but if I take a diet like keto, where essentially I'm like, okay, well, let me take one of those macronutrients being carbohydrates and let me lower that number, significantly there. And if the majority of people are overeating carbohydrates, I'd say, before this whole keto wave, well, then of course a lot of people are going to lose weight because you just simply pretty much removed or significantly lowered one of the macronutrients, which reduced the calories. This could be the same thing that's happening with a lot of intermittent fasting that people do. If you were eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then now you're not eating breakfast anymore, it's less calories. Or if you were just eating lunch and dinner and then you're snacking a whole bunch, watching Netflix, then now you have this cutoff time. So it's when you really break these things down and you ask yourself, okay, well, why is this working for that person, right? It goes to your point. It's like, well, it's working with their lifestyle. It's working with their lifestyle in a way that in this season of life, they're actually being consistent, right? They're actually being consistent with the things that matter, right? That lead to the results that they're getting there. So anyways, I love it. We could sit here and chat all day. I love what you do. I want to respect your time. So what is, if you have, I'll leave it with this here for the listeners. If we're talking to the people that feel like they're really struggling with this, they feel like it's something that, it's happening every weekend, or, it's just happening. Let's just say it's happening more than what they want, right? Obviously they've got a lot of good tips through this podcast here, but what would be the number one thing right now that you would go do right after this podcast? What's the number one action item that you would recommend to go do to help people to kind of move forward through this, to maybe build more awareness, to maybe just improve 1%, right, from this podcast? That'd be amazing.
I think the best thing that I could recommend is to increase awareness. And this comes from reflection, self-reflection, maybe journaling, or giving yourself 1 week of journaling and put everything you eat on a piece of paper, not in an app, not in your phone, but actually writing in a pen with pen and paper to everything you eat, at what time you eat it, how much you eat, how you feel before and during and after the meal. So you can write these things down for a week and put some thoughts around, why am I doing these things? Why did I choose chocolate at this time? What was I feeling? Was I just feeling anger? I was stressed. I was depressed. What was the root of, or what was the cause of that action? So bringing more awareness and also bringing more reflection into the actions help us to identify what we could do better and what are the potential areas that might we might be using food as a coping mechanism to deal with problems that probably are not going to be solved even if we eat certain things. So identify, well, I wasn't really hungry here, but I was just tired, but I just felt that I needed to eat. But was I hungry? No, I don't know. How do you tell if you were if it was like an emotional hunger or was it true hunger? Like if you ask yourself, if I'm really hungry, would I eat whatever I eat will solve the problem of being hungry, right? Like if you're really hungry, if you have, I don't know, a piece of meat, like a high protein meal that is no delicious, it's not like a piece of chocolate or a donut, would you still eat it? And that will probably reduce your hunger anyways. But if you want a chocolate and that's what you think straight away, maybe not necessarily you are hungry. It's that you're craving for something that is, you're looking for something else that is not necessarily to solve a hunger problem. So is it hunger? Is it anger? Is it that you feel lonely? Is that you're tired? What is it? So try to understand the root cause of those actions that allow you to be more aware of what is it that you can solve and respond to it. And when you are using food or like emotionally eating, you want to bring more self-awareness on understanding the emotions you're going through. And sometimes it is good to sit with the emotions rather than trying to run from them. So using food as a coping mechanism is like running from the emotions you're feeling rather than sitting with them and trying to sort of understand them, see what is the problem, why do you feel that way, and being able to respond differently rather than trying to hide away or run away from the emotions, because there's nothing that you're going to get better at by just not being aware of what your actions are after that emotion is being felt. So you want to uh, like catch the emotion in the moment. So rather than being very impulsive and like not rational, you want to start being rational and more self-control. So you want to, all right, I am feeling some kind of emotion right now. Is it, I just like hang up the phone with my husband. We had a fight or whatever. And you feel distressed. You feel like you want to cry, or you feel like you got to observe that emotion and ask yourself as well, is it eating? Is this eating going to solve my problem right now? Is it going to really make me feel better? And sometimes, and most of the times, their answer is not really, and potentially will make me feel worse if I am actually, if I have an additional goal that is like, I really want to feel good about myself. I want to look better as well. Like I'm looking after my physique, but I'm also looking after my mental health. So you gotta be more aware of these things so you can respond more with a better control, with more rational thoughts behind it, rather than just acting impulsively to run away from an emotion.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Awesome. Well, Astrid, thank you so much again for taking the time. I know that it's getting late for you there, and hey, the sun's about to come up here for me. So, where can where can the listeners kind of go to find you, to connect with you, social media, and kind of all those links there, and that way you can share them. I'll be sure to link it in the bio here as well. But yeah, where's the best place for people to kind of reach out and find you and follow you and learn from you?
Instagram is a place where I put most of my content and educational videos. Anti-diet dietitian. I also have a Spanish version of Instagram, which is Tu Coach Nutricional. You can go to that one if you speak Spanish. So I'm trying to build up that slowly. And I also started my YouTube channel as well. So I've been doing recently educational videos, IG live with different guests. So that is something that I've been making slowly as well. So you can find more educational information there. And my website, so Astrid dietitian.com is where you can find me as well. You might find that I have this is it's just growing. It's a very small website, so it's getting there as well. So everything I'm working in so many things that I think the best way you can find about me and all the links and everything is my Instagram, anti-diet dietitian.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Well, guys, definitely go check her out. Go follow her. She puts out tons of great content there, so you'll get tons of value from her. But guys, hope you got value from this podcast and hope you enjoyed it. And Astrid, thank you so much again for taking the time. And until next time.
No problem. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.